Hi, it's Sheila Kuehl. Welcome to Get Used to It. This is our holiday show, and depending on when you're watching it could be any holiday. We're thinking mostly of the winter holidays. And I'm very pleased today to have as my guests a family that I really wanted you to meet. We're going to start by talking to one member of this family, my good friend, Judith Light, a good friend to our community and frankly to humanity. Judith is an actress, as I'm sure I don't have to tell you, and an activist, and I'm very, very pleased to have you here today. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to see you. I was just going to say that to you, whichever one you're celebrating.
Yes, right. Well, we celebrate all of them at the end of the year.
This is good.
It gets a little crowded, but I'm so glad you're here.
I'm so happy to be here.
Well, it's interesting, Judith. Everyone in our community knows you so well, or feel that they do, because you never say no to an invitation to show up for us. But I doubt that people know actually very much about you. So tell me, where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Trenton, New Jersey, and I stayed there until I went to college, which was Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. And then after that, I went into repertory theater, and I was all around the country, and I had performed in Europe, and then I left and went to New York, and I was on Broadway and off-Broadway, and then I did the soap. God, I mean, I'm saying all these things, and I think I'm really not as old as I sound. You know, this is like...
Well, you started very young.
I started so young.
And you streaked to stardom, I think this is
well, I didn't streak to stardom, but it was a process.
But why did you want to act in the first place? I mean, it's not the kind of thing that absolutely every little girl thinks they want to do.
No, I think I wanted to act for all the wrong reasons. I wanted to be the center of attention. I wanted approval. And the combination of the things thereof. But the real reason that was underneath, which I've just begun to discover, is that I wanted to make a difference. And I wanted to be of service. And I wanted to find a way to use my celebrity to make a difference. I think when we were talking before at one point, you said something about service. That for those of us who are in public life, it's almost a requirement. It is certainly a responsibility, one's responsibility. And I've always felt very strongly about that. And when you meet one of the other members of this family a little bit later, Herb Hamsher, when I said that to her when we first met and started working together, he said, I can support you doing that. He said, celebrity has a lot of perks, everybody knows that. So I don't want to put that down in any way. But there's a sense in which it's very hollow and very shallow if you're not finding some way to give back.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of people who are, especially actors, I think, are asked to show up for stuff, whatever it is. And it's for a number of reasons. One, because they think if you're there, it's a draw. So I'm going to have a dinner, let's have Judith there, everybody will come see Judith. And that's fair, and we understand.
Absolutely.
That's like, I get that, I show up, I help make the event.
You bet, not a problem.
President shows up at the HRC dinner, a lot of people want to go hear him, and I think he understands the importance of being there, but also that it's going to, do it. But there's something else that happens too, and that is that a lot of times actors start to think that they actually have something to say.
Yes.
Now, the difference with you is you do have something to say. And how is it that, I'm impressed with how much you really get what the deal is in our community, for better or for worse. How does this happen?
Well, we were talking about growing up, and one of the things that I always felt was I always felt that I was an outsider. Wanting to be an actor so young, really made me feel like an outsider. I didn't really fit in. So in a sense, I always felt queer. And I mean that in this very general way of feeling like I had my nose pressed against the candy store window, and that inside was this incredibly wonderful world that I could not access because I was different in some way, because I wanted something that other people didn't necessarily want. So I kept trying to fit in with everybody and getting people to like me. they didn't. I mean, you know, the harder you try, the more they sort of push you away. And it wasn't until I finally, one summer, went to a performing arts camp, and all of a sudden, there was this whole group of people who were not just literally queer, but they were outsiders, and we were all there together. And I understood what I'd been wanting for so long was not just to fit in, but to contribute and make a difference and find a cohesive family that I knew that I was part of. I was overweight. I was weird. People didn't understand me. And so when I look at your community, I feel extremely empathetic. I know what it feels like to be prejudiced against, pushed aside, discounted. And what I so love about the community is the willingness to be courageous in being who you are, well, particularly in coming out, because I didn't have any role model to say, yoo-hoo, everybody, this is actually who I am. I'm very different, and maybe I'm a little weird to you, but I know somewhere I'm going to fit in. But until I got connected to this community, I didn't understand what an incredible role model you are and what kind of an inspiration you are to people.
Well, it seems like something, there's always something about this community that kind of breaks your heart a little bit. I mean, it's easy to see. And there is an identification, and my own projection about it was that you understood both the pain of it and the sort of, I don't know what, the joy of it, the fun of it, the campiness of it. It also draws, lesbians are drawn to gay men's culture because of that. It's a lot more fun than our culture, you know. Mm-hmm. But there's something very brave about it that we really saw begin to be exhibited really in the AIDS Holocaust.
That's right.
Now, when were you first aware of people around you being gay? I mean,
oh, when I was very young. When I first went to that performing arts camp, I must have been maybe 11 years old. That was when I first, I knew it, and it didn't seem bizarre to me in any way. They were fabulous people. They were just people. I've always felt that way. It doesn't matter what someone's sexual orientation is. It doesn't matter the color of their skin. It doesn't matter what they do for a living. We are all human beings under the skin, and it doesn't, all those things don't matter. We're all a part of what I consider God's world, and however you hold that. But there's a sense, a very strong spiritual thread for me in my life that I've also seen exhibited in the community. It's true. I mean, lesbians and lesbians pulled to support gay men during the AIDS crisis in a way that I've never seen. I mean, we have not seen communities operate in this world when literally nobody was there for the community. This community pulled itself together and said, we will take care of our own. I mean, everywhere you look, there's a level of inspiration and power and courage. And that's what I keep seeing. And it's interesting you said there's something about it that breaks your heart. It doesn't break my heart as much as it breaks my heart open. Mm-hmm. It's a very thrilling and moving experience to see people operate like that.
Well, and you know, in the industry there's this myth that it's so open to this, and yet I think we saw, because of all the brouhaha about Ellen coming out, that this must not be an industry incredibly open about gay and lesbian people. What's your impression? I mean, you're a star, and you've been working as an actress for a long time. What do you see in terms of the industry's response to this?
I think there's a level at which the industry does very well with this. It's just like anything, you know, and there's a lot of movement. It's not as much movement as I would like to see. I would like to see everybody coming out and everybody standing up and saying, this is important and this is important for us to relate to. So for me, it can't be fast enough. But I also know that everybody has to go at their own pace. And so, of course, I'd like to see more. But it's everybody in their own time. Again, you know, it's like what this community demonstrates is that what one needs to work on is their lack of prejudice, their lack of bigotry, and expanding themselves into diversity. So while I'd like to see more, and I wish they would hurry up and everybody would get together, it's not, it isn't always that way. So it's finding the acceptance and relaxing about it.
Well, speaking of diversity,
Yes.
since this is our holiday show, this means it's our family show.
Right.
And although I'm a great admirer of yours, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show is because I wanted to have your family on the show.
I'm so glad.
Yeah, me too. Tell us a little about your family.
Well, I am married to Robert Desiderio, and the other part of our family, my closest and dearest friends and family and managers and business partners are Herb Hamsher and Jonathan Stoller, who have been in a relationship for 17 years. And we travel together, we work together. They have a place that they can stay with us. We have a place where when we go to Aspen, we stay with them. There's a connectedness that is like nothing I've really ever seen before, but something that I always dreamed about and something that I always wanted. We talk about everything. We work together at a level of not just making the business our life or our careers our life, but the context of our relationship is that our life, individually and collectively, so that everybody's growing and working and supporting each other to move in the directions that they want to go in.
Sounds like the ideal family, the chosen family, as it were, huh?
It is, and that doesn't mean that it's this, I want to be very careful about this because a lot of people say, oh my God, you know, they have this and they have that. It's hard work. It isn't this picture perfect little adorable little family. It is, we deal with, we talk about issues all the time. If somebody's having a problem with somebody, we discuss it. It's very hard work.
Now you met Herb first, right?
I did.
Of the other three, as we say.
Yeah, I met Herb.
How did that happen?
Well, Herb was working in Philadelphia, and his background is in psychology, and he was teaching at Temple, and he had a very large practice in Temple, and he had an assistant who said to him, this was at a time of EST and the Hunger Project, and in which I was very involved in both, and Stanley, and so was Herb, and Stanley said to Herb, there's this actress in New York that you have to meet. And he said, why? And Stanley said, I don't know. We were just supposed to meet her. And we met. Buckminster Fuller was giving a lecture at Town Hall. And so I met him briefly after that. And he said, I'm going to be speaking next week at Buckminster Fuller's World Game. And for those people who don't know that, there's this thing called War Games. And so Buckminster Fuller decided that he wanted to do a World Game, which is about people getting together and peace and connection. And so Herb was speaking at this, and he said, well, you could come and we could have lunch afterwards. And I said, yes, absolutely. And I heard him speak, and there was this voice within me that said, oh, it's you. I know I'm supposed to be listening to you. Now, I hope that doesn't sound very Southern California woo-woo, but...
Hey, we are in Southern California, and we have something to teach the world. I'm happy to hear this.
But in point of fact, it was on the East Coast, so it was in New York. And so I just said, everything he's saying is resounding within me. I know this is right. I know these principles are accurate. And I was fascinated by what he had to say. And so we just started talking, and we started working together very casually. I mean, he was still in Philadelphia, and he was doing a lot of work with John Denver, and so he would come into New York, and he would come on the set of One Life to Live. And we would start talking. We would be talking in the makeup room about the show, and people started gathering around. Mm-hmm. And so I knew that other people were responding, and they were hearing, in a sense, what I was hearing. And he just started changing the way I was working. And it was at that point in time where he said, if you want to do something to make a difference, I can support you to do that. And so it was very kind of casually talking and working and friendship, building a friendship and a relationship. And then he met Jonathan, and they got together, and that was in 1980. And then in 1981, Robert came on One Life to Live, and he and I got together, and then we all started working together. And then they had moved to Aspen by this time, and we're coming into California a bit, and then I was auditioning for several different things when I first got into California, and one of them was a show called You're the Boss. And I wasn't going to go in for the audition. I was going up for 3 shows at one time, and you have to put them in a particular order. And one of them was called Staff of Life, one was called You're the Boss, and the other one was called Command 5. And so I said, I don't know which show to put in first position. So I said, okay, Staff of Life. We've all heard of Staff of Life. You've all heard of Staff of Life, right? We disappeared. We don't have any idea where it is. And so I said, listen, I put that in first position, and I said, I'm not going to go in for the You're the Boss audition. And I remember Herb said to me, what do you mean you're not going in for it? And I said, well, I've got the other one in first position. He said, you're not going in because you're afraid. He said, you get yourself over to that audition. He said, they're willing to accept you in second place. You go to that audition. And it was because of that that I ended up getting what became Who's the Boss.
Well, I think it's actually time for us to meet this family and let them speak for themselves.
I think that'd be great.
Since they're ringed around here watching, thinking, when can I talk about what I experienced of that? So we're going to take a very short break, and when we come back, we'll meet this fabulous family. Don't go away.
Last night, I met the most incredible girl.
So sexy the way she held her cigarette.
Her clothes reeked of tobacco. Her fingernails were kind of yellow. Later, we kissed. It was like licking an ashtray. And then she whispered the sweetest thing in my ear. I think I'm in love.
Hi, welcome back to Get Used to It. This is our holiday show. As I indicated, if it's not a holiday, too bad, it's a rerun. So welcome back. I'm Sheila Kuehl, your fabulous host. And we've been talking to Judith Light, who is a wonderful actress and activist, been very, very, very supportive of our community, as I know I don't have to tell you. But mostly we've been talking about Judith's family, and now I want you to meet them, because this is a family that I'm totally fascinated with. First, Herb Hamsher, who has been, is now a manager and producer in Tetrahedron Productions, about which we'll hear a bit more. Welcome, Herb. Very glad you're here.
Me too.
And his lover, Jonathan Stoller, his partner, I don't know, you'll tell me what words we're using.
We use all of the above. Right.
Or
Spouse,
actually Herb is
husband.
Jonathan's partner, you know,
Right,
whatever. Jonathan is a financial manager of Tetrahedron Productions and a financial analyst. You've met Judith. We've had a lovely talk so far in the first part of the show. And this is Judith's husband, Robert Desiderio, who is a wonderful actor. and whom I love. Look at this group. Is this not a great group? Welcome, Robert. Herb, let me start with you. Judith told us a little bit about your getting together, but tell me a little about your life pre-JL, as it were.
I grew up in Iowa.
Iowa?
Which is a lonely existence. And I was really odd man out in my family and in my community. And so I have really always felt queer. And I knew I was gay from the age of 8, at least the age of 8. But I felt queer in the sense of being an outsider way beyond that. I was a good student. I liked to study, you know. Literally my best friends were the ministers of my church. Those were the ones that I could dialogue with and talk to and borrow books from and discuss ideas with. I read Freud when I was 12 and loved it, you know. So that's very odd in Iowa. But that's what I've always loved. And that's why I became a psychologist. That's why I became a professor. And when I met Judith, I was still a professor, although I had begun to work a lot with corporations, and I was working with John Denver and traveling a lot. And
working with John Denver in terms of supporting his career? Or,
well, John and I were both on the advisory board of EST. That's where we met. And when President Carter appointed the Presidential Commission on World Hunger, John was appointed. Harry Chapin really got that to happen. And I was also on the advisory board of the Hunger Project, as was John. And so I became his sort of ally in reading stuff for him, helping him formulate positions, knowing, helping to steer the commission from behind, stuff like that. And inevitably, yes, it became partly career input, advice giving, and there somehow automatically, when I know people, the conversations start becoming about relationship, about life, about what works, what doesn't work. So with John, as with a lot of people, I ended up talking about everything.
I'm so sorry. You must be. You must miss him.
I do. We haven't been connected for a few years, but yes, it was. His death was very sudden, very tragic, and hit everybody in a very powerful way. I mean, he was. What is gone as a result of his death is sad. It's upsetting. But what's more upsetting, in a way, is that in my estimation, John never really got to own that side of him before he died. He was in a process. Everybody else knew John's magnificence in a way much more than he did, and I wish for him that he could have gotten there. He was one of those people that I analogize so often with being gay. It's like I always say that I always felt blessed to be gay because I knew what it was. I knew why I didn't fit in. I knew what it was I had to come to grips with. And I truly believe that everybody feels queer in a sense. I said I've had a clinical practice for 35 years. And I have yet to meet a human being who feels like they are the right stuff. Like they are exactly what their parents want them to be, what they would want to be. I've never seen that person. If I ever saw that person, I would expect them to walk on water.
Either that or you wouldn't trust it.
Right, exactly. Oh, I've met plenty of people who think they think that.
That's right.
Lots of people.
And Judith said that it was more difficult when you're, in a sense, when you're not queer, knowing what to come out about.
Exactly.
That is the the essence of your pain about your difference or whatever.
Exactly.
That's why I
Because
think it's so
everybody's got it.
valuable for the straight community to look to the gay and lesbian communities, because that's where you can see some role models for people who know what they have to come out about, and you can it helps you as well.
So you met through the Hunger Project?
We met through an employee of mine who knew Judith in New York, and she was working in the New York Hunger Project. I was on the board of the Hunger Project and very active in the Philadelphia Hunger Project. And so Stanley said, you need to know this actress. And as Judith said, I said, why? And he said, I'm not sure. He just said, you know, back in the days of Est, I just get it, you know. So I said, okay. So we met, and we had that kind of connection. And Judith is like a sponge. I mean, she is. She wants to hear, she wants to talk, she wants to learn, she wants to deal with things. She wants to understand more. You know, she told me a long time ago about how she wished that as a child she had gotten to stay in the temple and study with the men. And that's always been my experience of her. She wants to talk about deep things. She wants to delve, and I love that. And I always said, all I ever want from people is for them to make good use of me. I always say, use me. Because through my idiosyncratic process of growing up, what I've spent my life doing is trying to figure everything out. And reading philosophy and theology and psychology and all of that. And I find people just absolutely infinitely fascinating. I love people, I love life, and I really think that we can master it. You know, I think there are principles that allow us to master life. And there are lots of approaches to that, but you have to work at it. You know, and I've always said to people, if they spent half as much energy in developing mastery of life as they do in mastering handball or tennis or golf or skiing, their life would be magnificent. Well, Judith is one of those people that really wants to, and she does.
Well, it shines. It definitely shines from her,
Absolutely.
but also from you. Jonathan, when did you come into the picture? I'll call this the picture. I realize you had a full life before that. But
About 2 years after they met, I met Herb, and actually I have an identical twin brother, and he met Herb, and they had a very powerful connection, and he said to Herb, you know, I have this weird thing, but who you really need to meet is my brother. And he kept saying that to Herb, so Herb came out and visited my family, my biological family, and we instantly connected and have basically been together ever since. 4 months later we moved in together, so that's how we met.
now, do you see this as your family? This
Oh,
group
yeah.
of four?
Yeah.
How did that come about? I mean,
Well, it
you can't
evolves
just do
over-
it because Herb wanted this to happen. Do you know what I mean?
Well, there wasn't four of us, for one thing, when I met Herb. I mean, Judith and Herb were friends, and they lived in different cities, and we met and fell into a committed relationship instantly and moved in together. And some months later, I met Judith, and we connected. I loved her instantly, and then over time, and then she met Robert soon after that, and over time we were working with them in an informal way. And at some point it just became clear that we were getting more and more connected, and it formalized it, and you know, we became their managers, and I ended up handling the finances. I mean, a lot of it just came together in pieces because whatever was needed next fell into place.
Well, actually, what was interesting is Jonathan, he wasn't into finances before all this. I mean, he was, but not in the way that he is now. So there was a piece missing in terms of we needed somebody we could really trust with our money. And Jonathan said, well, I'm willing to pursue this and to study this and see how this turns out. So he filled, I mean, it was something that he was interested in, but also it was a vacuum for us. Otherwise, we'd have to look outside, because the people that we've had in the past were fine, but they just weren't, you know, that soul that we
Well, it's an
wanted.
interesting integration of the personal and the work stuff. Now, when did you come into the picture, Robert?
At the end of Act 1. This is the
It's a
big plot
good
point.
Not a bad entry point, really, in the plot.
I came involved and did not want to have to do anything with Herb and Jonathan, like I told you. I mean, I was this kid from the Bronx who, the issue of them being gay wasn't an issue for me. I mean, I had grown up with, well, actually not grown up in college and stuff. I never had an issue with people who were gay. It was just, when I said to Judith, she said, well, Herb and Jonathan are coming in, let's spend some time together. And I said in my inimitable way, well, you want to talk that Herb and Jonathan talk? Meaning the stuff that was real. So I would go around the corner and play video games at the arcade.
And we would talk Herb and Jonathan.
None of that deep stuff for you, huh?
No. It's still a challenge for me. And it's been a process of literally just hanging in. A lot of it's been very passive in terms of, you know, it hasn't been active, but I haven't left. I mean, I've stayed. And now I'm in the process of wanting to turn that around and be more proactive, which is very demanding for me. Because I didn't have the impulse that Herb had to meet with the clergy and to read. You know, I would go down to the basement and read Jules Verne or something, without, you know, and not talk to anybody about it. So that was a lot of my history.
Now, what made you want to be an actor?
I think one of the main reasons, as I look back on it, was I was never talkative much. I'm not prone to sharing things. In a circumstance like this, it's a little different. Because, you know, it's TV, it's a camera, so I find that sort of pulls me out a little bit, the showman, which is the good news and the bad news. It was because I had something to say. You know, you get a script, there's actually this word, so you can actually talk and share something, which is not your thoughts, but it's someone else's. So I think it was a way for me to come out of myself. I mean, the story I tell was I was very shy and didn't go to bars to meet women. That was not in me. So one of the ways was to be involved in theater. So, you know, all these pretty women in theater, so it's like, okay, that's one way. But I think
And it worked, didn't it?
I did. I think the
Surprise when you meet as gay men.
Right, that was the unspoken part.
Well, but the gay men were just wonderful. I mean, I realized recently, actually about a few years ago, that most of the men that I knew that I were connected to were gay because they were willing to share and talk. And Herb said, you need to get into a men's group. And I resisted that for about a year or two. And finally get into a men's group where I think there are 1 or 2 gay men in it, but mostly are straight guys. And it's an interesting experience for me to be around straight guys and to have a conversation and to be willing to push ourselves through that to talk about real issues.
I think, well, from what I hear, this is an issue that's pulling straight men into a number of venues just to be able to talk. I mean, at the beginning of the women's movement 25 years ago, we had the same problem. I mean, women were not supposed to talk to each other. They were in competition, they were nonverbal, they were focused on men, etc. And so when women started getting together, there were, just like some of the new men's groups, very clear rules about how we would speak to each other in order to take care of each other, in order to make sure that we at least said some to one thing positive. I mean, very artificial rules, that radical therapy stuff, you know, about giving strokes and, you know, how to give criticism and all that stuff. And I think that straight men are starting to have the same experience because they're not encouraged to talk. So in a funny way, this is a cross-cultural family. In many ways, I'm sure. I don't want to just say straight and gay. Do you think that, I don't want to make more of this than you think, but Herb, do you think this is also, I see it as exemplary. Does this occur to you? People don't usually live their lives to set an example, but it's a good model.
I think it's a wonderful model. When actually, one of the things that's interesting, you introduced us as all being a part of Tetrahedron Productions. the thing that I was talking about in the presentation I was making at Bucky's World Game that Judith originally heard was my theoretical analogizing between Bucky's geometry, physical geometry, and psychological reality. And one of the things that Bucky talked about is that the smallest, most stable unit of matter, physical matter, is the tetrahedron. And so I always hypothesize that the tetrahedron, which is essentially a relationship relating to a relationship, would be the most stable human societal structure.
Now, describe a tetrahedron. So
a tetrahedron is a pyramid
it.
that's built on a triangle. So a triangular base and then another point. So there's 4 points and 4 sides.
But the pyramid, instead of the usual configuration that we think of in Egypt, has only 3 sides. I shouldn't say only, but has 3 sides.
Correct.
And then the 4th side is whatever side it's standing on.
Yeah, that's right.
And no matter how you turn it, it's the same figure, right?
Right. An equilateral tetrahedron, it can be put on any side, and it's always the same figure. Right. So we are 4 points, and it's 4 points and 4 sides, and theoretically, in a tetrahedron, all points are equally connected to each other.
And each has a relationship with the other.
Right.
So, given the tetrahedron configuration, does that mean that each one of you feels you have an independent relationship with each of the other 3?
Absolutely.
Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, but was that hard or kind of just not so hard?
It's hard. It's difficult.
Go, Robert.
That's really. I'm still working on mine.
All 3 of them.
Yeah.
But the truth is that you have as much of a relationship with each of us as each of us does with each other. Yours is of a different nature.
Mm-hmm.
Our connections are powerful. I mean, you resist.
Yeah.
You resist talking the Herb and Jonathan stuff. But your connection with, my experience is that my relationship with you is every bit as powerful as my relationship with Judith. Mm. It's just of a different nature.
One of the things that we've often talked about is that because Robert is here and willing to hang in, it's a very unusual position for a straight man. To me, I have a lot of respect for him for being willing to be in a situation. And many times Herb and Jonathan have said to him, particularly Herb has said, you have to understand that you are a model for the straight community off of your relationship with 2 gay men, because it is an unusual relationship. And that's to go back to your point about what we're talking about this being exemplary. I think each one of us in our own individual way is exemplary, and as a group we are exemplary. And I know you wanted to say something about that too.
Well, basically that I think that everybody is an example of something. What makes anything or anybody exemplary is simply they're doing something intentionally. And what we do is very intentional. It's very conscious. I mean, we work at our relationships. Jonathan and I have worked at our relationship from the first minute. I mean, literally the first minute. And Judith and I have, and Robert and we have, sometimes against his will at a conscious level. But that's okay, because that's part of the example.
But we're all committed to being together, so as long as you're committed to staying in the game, things are going to come up, and if you don't leave the room, you're still in the game. Mm-hmm.
That's why I said to you before, it's not this perfect thing that everybody goes, oh God, aren't they so cute?
No, we're coming to your house for Thanksgiving, and we'll see the fight.
It's not
I'm just kidding. We're not going to their house for Thanksgiving. But
it is a dynamic process.
It adds so many extra levels. I mean, I'm sure that people watching the show are thinking, but the primary relationships are really the dualities or whatever. And what I experience with the 4 of you is that is the case. And yet, there's also not just a work relationship, but something beyond. I mean, you cook, you eat dinner together, you go places together, you go on vacation together,
I cook.
you cook.
That's right.
It's
Now
That's right.
that's exemplary.
That's
Isn't
right.
that?
No, what, no,
The straight
what is
man
the-
cooks.
So
Ways that I
but
contribute.
wait, what is really exemplary is that the way Robert was talking about Jonathan coming into finances is the way that Robert came into cooking.
Yeah.
Robert did not come into the tetrahedron as a chef.
No, Judith is the one. Judith's the gourmet cook. I didn't. I
Hello?
didn't. Oh, that's John. Sorry.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Nobody's the cook.
No, what's funny
What's funny is we all knew how to
We all
cook,
cook.
and
They-
Robert
they
didn't.
did. I did not know how to cook. I would make minute steaks and melt cheese on it. That's what I did growing up.
That's not the way we eat now.
But now he's fed.
Oh, he's
But
incredible.
see, that's part of the growing thing too, that I think, I mean, there's two things that go on here for me. One is, of course, people claim that gay people don't have families, that we don't form families, and we know that that's a negative myth that really just kind of trivializes the work that we do together and our found and chosen families. And this is definitely one. But mostly straight people don't have found and chosen families. At least they don't admit they do. They have nuclear families. But if you have Thanksgiving dinner and you invite all your friends over, that's your chosen found family, and often we feel more comfortable even, with them.
Well,
So
and
it
straight
feels like
people
it's working
feel-
for all of you.
Straight people are in a way, this is a curious phrase, but in a way they are biologically trapped. In a sense that they are procreating, they have their children, and when Jonathan was talking about his identical twin, whom I met first, when they had their first child, Roger and Naomi, they said, "Oh, it's not going to change our relationship," and we, in a way, had another little tetrahedron with Roger and Naomi, and it's totally changed. I mean, they have 2 children, and we very seldom see them relatively, and they, given their choice, I think they would love to have a chosen family that goes beyond biology with us to a larger degree. But the press, the strain, the stress, the responsibilities, etc., of your biological family eliminates choice for most heterosexual people.
Well, and also that's not necessarily the most healthy relationship that that people have. I mean, it wasn't until I was talking to you in the pre-interview for this, Jonathan, that I began to understand who your father had been and his relationship, not only to you but to the whole sort of area. Will you tell us a little bit about him, if you can?
Yes, sure. My father was a psychoanalyst and a professor at UCLA and a researcher. He did a lot of work in gender identity and was actually an advocate of not of gays per se, but he was an advocate of the scientific process and said that it can't be shown what makes people straight. So how can people say that gay people are sick in any way? Because we don't know what makes people gay either. They're just people acting out and living out sexuality. So he was very adamant against the point of view that there's something wrong with being gay.
And he said there was absolutely no reason to expect that 2 gay people in a relationship were any more or less neurotic than straight people.
Yeah.
But he was engaged in a pretty heated dialogue, I suppose you might say, with another researcher on
Yes, with Charles Socarides.
Charles Socarides, whose
Yes.
son Richard is our liaison in the White House for our community.
Yes.
So here's Robert Stoller, your dad, a researcher in gender identity with a gay son. Here's Professor Socarides, also a researcher very adamantly anti-gay.
His point is that you can fix gay people to make
can
them
cure them.
You can cure them. Things can be good.
And
like
his
they
son
aren't
Richard
good.
is also gay.
Right.
Very
Yes.
interesting. I love when stuff turns out this
And
way.
Richard and I are almost the exact same age. It's very bizarre.
But your father was not, what was his reaction when you came out to him?
He was very upset and didn't speak to me for 3 years, which was very difficult, and yet it was an important part of our process in our relationship, because it gave us an issue around which we could get into a deeper level of relating. And he was, I grew up straight, so he was pretty floored by the fact that here I was moving in with a man, committing myself to a lifestyle that is viewed as gay.
He felt it was a phase.
He hoped it was a phase.
Well, it's interesting because even when our parents are very good about these things, it kind of throws them if they're going to have to deal with it in their own family.
Well, that's what happened. Theoretically, he was totally there, and he's very liberal in his thinking, but to have his own son be gay brought up his own internal homophobia, which was very difficult for him, and he got angry at me for shining a light in that area of himself. He didn't say that, but that was my observation. And he also felt that it would invalidate his work because people would say he was defending his gay son, which was not the case because he didn't actually know I was going to turn out like this
Well,
at the time.
it's interesting because all of you do have families, families. What is their response, if any, to this arrangement, or to this family?
My parents adore them. I mean, they were so happy when I married Robert. And then when my father, it was very interesting. Robert was shooting a movie, it was last year, and we were all planning to go to visit my parents in Florida. And so he ended up not being able to come, but Herb and Jonathan went with me. And my father kept talking about my 3 sons. My father, I don't remember what it was you were talking with my father about at the breakfast table.
It was, we were talking about Yiddish.
And I could see how moved my father was by him. It was like he finally had sons that I think he always wanted. I mean, in a sense, he also treated me, as I'm an only child, and he gave me, in a sense, also what he would have given a son, that I was not able to appreciate at the time, but have been able to appreciate much more now, seeing the way he relates to them. They adore them. I mean, my mother's forever saying, are they okay? You know, are they with you? Is everybody okay? I mean, it's a group, it's a family. There's no...
But don't you think your parents experience some critique because you're always going to gay things? I mean, there must be some people in Florida that say to your parents, why is Judith doing this? She's at the great gay march, she's at the gay dinner. You know, what is this?
Some of those people may not even be aware of that.
That may be true, although there's a lot of television about this now.
I know, but you know, I have to tell you, I don't think, I think if that had been said to my parents, I think I would have heard. I think my parents would have said, oh my God, what are you doing? When we said, my mother taped the entire march for us and sent it to us. She said, oh, you're going to be so excited. And then we called her at the last minute. We said, I'm going to be opening for HRC when the president's speaking. She said, oh, I'll tape it. And was so excited. My father said, I can't believe you turned out like this. This is such a thrill for us. We're so deeply moved by who you are and what you do. And they have gay couple friends. There were 2 women in their condominium in New York that they were really close with, two gay men, two lesbian couple, a gay male couple, a couple of them. I mean, when I was on the cover of The Advocate, they were ecstatic. I don't think they experienced that. They took the tape of the HRC thing over to their friends, and they all were having brunch, and they all sat and watched the whole thing.
And I think that the truth is that each of our biological families just simply accepts that this is our family.
I think what happens is people in their heads, it's very strange and they don't know what to do, and then they're with us and they have a more heart connection. They say, oh yeah, I get this. I don't know what it is, but this feels good. And so, you know, it's just what it is.
Well, we certainly have been saying recently that in our community we feel by virtue of some kinds of oppression, we've had to find other models because many of us get kicked out of our biological families, or, you know, just have to find other models. We can't marry, etc. And so I think that we've been saying, yeah, maybe because of this, we might have been pushed into it, you know, to have to find something different.
Well,
but because we might have something to teach about this.
Well, see, that's actually the point that I was going to make earlier when you asked me about the ways in which we are exemplary. I think that every human being is in a position to have to create new models, because every life is a unique one, and we don't automatically operate in a way that demonstrates mastery over life. But when you're gay, and when you know you're gay when you're little, you know that you've got to figure it out. You've got to find a way to be in this world, and if you take that opportunity and are not oppressed by it, but rather end up experiencing it as an opportunity, you end up like the community as a whole has ended up as a result of AIDS. We could have been done in by it, just like we could have been done in by being gay. We haven't. We have used that to stand on top of it and rise to another level. And I am so proud of us as a people, as a result of the way we've responded to AIDS. I think we've demonstrated who we really are now, and that's what I think that we have done. I think that they are so fabulous in being willing to look at a gay couple and say, we want to use you as a role model. You figured some things out, obviously. I mean, we look at you, we experience you, we know you figured some things out. We want to use you as an example. And their willingness to be queer in that way is exemplary and inspires me. And Robert, in coming from where he comes from, and as he said at the beginning, it's like, we're not going to talk that Herb and Jonathan stuff, are we? But the fact that you have been willing to participate and hang in there and do something that isn't automatic is, I think, mind-boggling.
And it's true, and I was just going to say that too about their relationship. We watch their relationship, and it's the best relationship that I have seen. Mm-hmm. And when I look at that, and you said something to me before about I show up but I have something to say, that I'm empathetic with the community. And when I see that my family doesn't get to get married like we do, that is very difficult for me. Now, whether they want to do that or not doesn't make any difference to me. It doesn't matter. The fact that they cannot is what really deeply disturbs me. It deeply disturbs me about our society and often who we pretend we are as people, that we are open and willing and available to have everybody be the same and have everything. Well, that's not true. So that's how I feel driven to say something about that, because they are, in fact, my family, and they can't have a lot of the things that we have.
Well, it's interesting that you were brought together by this connection to Buckminster Fuller, because when I was working at UCLA advising student speakers group, they invited Bucky Fuller to come and speak, and we got to have lunch with him, because that's what the students did, and so I was their advisor, so I got to go. And at lunch, you know, students, they're all very sort of perky, and they come with a little list of questions because this fabulous man, they have to write down what they ask. And one student said to him, Mr. Fuller, could you describe your work? And he thought for a minute, and he said, well, I'm a person who, driving along the road, and I see there's a log across the road. I stop, I get out, and I move the log. And the students, I think, did not know exactly how to figure this out, you know. And yet, in each of the things that you've said, it seems as though, I mean, you refer to working on things, working with things, working together, though I think everything shouldn't be work. The point, it's not just showing up for our community, Judith, but the way I see you show up for each other.
Well, but we recontextualize work. As I say, work is like working on your tennis game. Mm-hmm. This is fun.
It's alive. And also, I couldn't show up the way I show up if I didn't have their support. Every single one of them. I would not be articulating the things that I'm articulating if it were not for them. These are the things we talk about.
We're out of time. I know, it's hard to believe, like the whole hour went already. I want to thank you, Herb Hamsher, Jonathan Stoller, Judith Light, Robert Desiderio. Tetrahedron family is really what it is. They say we have no families, we're doing it for ourselves, and I say to the country, get used to it. Thanks for being with us.